Hey, welcome to the podcast today. I'm Paul Monahan, and I want to help you lead, play, and perform at your best. My mission is to help my clients to play better, struggle less, and enjoy more. Got an amazing conversation ahead today with a guy by the name of Mike D'Andrea. And let me tell you a little bit about Mike. We're going to jump into some really cool questions today and some conversation. Mike's a former NCAA Division I football player. Mike was a blue chip recruit, had a bunch of choices when it was time to go play college football. He picked The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, and was a member of the 2003 National Championship squad under Jim Tressel. After graduating, Mike opened T3 Performance in Avon, Ohio, where Mike is from, just outside of Cleveland. And over the years, he's built this facility and this business into a premier performance center for athletes that come from all over Cleveland, all over Ohio, and a bunch of different places. I know Mike not only as an accomplished athlete and business professional, but as a lifelong learner and a growth mindset guy. You're going to love this conversation with Mike. Today, we're going to talk about how you prepare yourself physically and mentally for the challenges that you face, no matter the domain that you are playing or performing in. So, Mike, great to see you. Great to have you on the call today.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Paul.
Yeah, you too. You too. Absolutely. I want to jump right in, Mike. When did you figure out you were good enough to play football at an elite level?
You know, I think it was honestly probably when letters started coming in. So that would have been junior year. I had some letters coming in, and then end of my junior year. You know, back then, this was like 2001. You didn't have like Huddle. Today you have Huddle that automatically puts together your highlight film.
Yeah, right.
I remember I went to this like random guy's apartment who made highlight films for amateur athletes, and I had like 10 tapes, and I had to go through them like, hey, do this one on this tape and this. So we pieced it together.
This is all VHS, essentially.
All VHS, yep.
Oh my God.
And so put it together, sent it out, hope for the best. And then within like a month, we started getting some letters. And so that's kind of when I had an idea. So
the letters start coming in, and I'm real curious about like what that does for your psyche as a player. I mean, you're 16, 17, 18. I'm sure that, look, every kid that plays football when they're 16 and 17, they dream of the NFL probably, or some version of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that where was that your, did you aspire to that, or like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, no, I'd say that that aspiration was there from the time I was 5. And I think it is for most boys, right? But
absolutely.
But it was definitely something that was there early on, and it persisted all the way through. And so it was not, from that aspect, it was like you had that singular focus of like, I don't care what it takes, we're going to get there. And so I started getting into like training and speed and strength stuff when I was 11 and 12. And yeah.
What were you so good at? I mean, that it made, right? That
making highlight tapes. Yeah.
Clearly. It goes without saying. We didn't have to ask that.
Yeah. I think it was just and I've reflected on this a little bit too with business, but I think it's just, I was fortunate to have a really good, mom and dad. And I was in an environment where they could just let me focus on what I wanted to focus on. And I think, when you're training and working out and you have that singular focus of playing college football and someday the NFL, it's like, okay, I got to get faster. I got to get stronger. I got to get better at my football skills. So it's pretty simple what you got to focus on. Now it's just a matter of going out and doing that every day. And I feel like sometimes people make it, more complicated than it has to be. So it's just finding what are those 2 to 3 main items to focus on and go all in on it.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about sort of what today's athlete is going to look and feel like versus, say, 20 years ago and kind of what their challenges are, because you're right in the middle of that, especially high school and college. I am curious, what was your mental game like when you were in high school?
So from the mental game, you mean like how did I show up to compete, or what was I thinking about during the day? I mean,
Yeah. Well, I don't mean like, the girls you were thinking about, like, cause we were all in high school thinking about nothing but girls. Right. But no, I mean, when it comes to football, and I start with this premise that in a lot of the work that I do right now, as you and I have talked about, is around this concept of the most important game, right? So we'll go to, hang on a second. We've got a sponsor moment here, Mike. Just 1 second here. Let's go to this. Oops, not that. This moment brought to you by the most important game. Play better, struggle less, and enjoy more by Paul Monahan. Available where all fine books are sold. that's our sponsorship moment, Mike.
are they paying you for that or what?
Yeah, they paid me. Yeah,
Okay,
there's a contract. They paid for that moment.
between
So
you and you. I like it.
the revenues have been rolling in on that.
Great book. I'm like a third of the way through, by the way. Love the stories.
That's
Good stuff.
great.
Yes.
Well, yeah, the idea then, right? And we've talked about this. The idea is there's an outside game.
Mm-hmm.
And we all play the outside game and we all focus on the outside game. So in football, it's like quite literally the blocking and tackling. It's not the metaphor. It's quite literally, right?
Yep.
And so it's the body, the physical body and the strength and conditioning and all of that. But in any performance domain, there's also another element to it. And it's not the outside game, but it's the inside game. It's the game played here between the ears. And so whenever I'm definitely trying to understand for people, like, when do they start noticing the inside game, this game in here? And when do they start noticing when it starts serving them in productive ways versus those times when it's not serving me?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the root of my question. So
Yes, I think I almost, I guess the way that I thought about it and still kind of think about it, just in playing on a different game now, with business, but there's almost like the pre-game. So, how do you prepare? Do you show up fully confident in the fact that you've done all the work, you went to all the practice, put the reps in, put the time in, got a good night's sleep the night before, had a good meal, drank enough water, like everything that leads up to, that moment 2 to 3 hours before you compete, and the fact that, like, okay, I'm here and I feel great. And, I did track as well. And, track is unique in the sense that, like, every inch counts. And I was throws, shot put, and discus. And so you really notice, like, in football it's different because you're going out there, you're running, if on one day you're running a 4.6 and another day you're running a 4.58 because you feel a little better, you don't notice those subtle changes. But in shot put and a game like golf, you definitely do. And so, I was always very particular about, like, my really 2 to 3 days leading up, how I ate, how I slept, how I trained. And then I could remember, especially at Ohio State, like, on game days, Tressel would have us kind of wake up at the hotel and walk around. And I remember walking up steps and saying, okay, my legs feel like they got spring to them today. I feel good and I'm like ready. I'm like, 100%. So there's that pregame moment, and then there's the actual in the game moment. So you give yourself the best chance you can to be fully optimized before they blow that whistle. Mm-hmm. And then in game, again, football and it's almost like there should be like 2 different roadmaps, because, like, a game like football and basketball, it just moves so fast. You don't have time to think, if you missed a shot or if you missed a tackle, you get a chance, 30 seconds later to do another one.
Sure.
Shot put and discus was different because you only had three chances to throw. And, you had to make sure you made the most of every single one. Golf is a game where every shot matters. And then on top of that, you get, a nice few minutes to walk from one shot to the next to go into your mind and
go to the dark place.
Yeah. And so I feel like the mental game, and it's different even in football with a quarterback to a linebacker, but I feel like the mental game in those really high action sports is almost like pre and post. At least it was for me versus,
Mm-hmm.
like a shot and track where it's like your first throw and then you're going through, you got like 5 minutes till you throw again. So you're going through, what could I have done better? And just, how do you remain positive with it?
Yeah, and that's something I hadn't really considered. Like when you talk about something like football, it's unbelievably reactionary. Right? It's so
Mm-hmm.
fast paced,
Yeah.
and like what's a typical play? Is it 8 seconds or 10 seconds or
So, 6 to 10.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that? And you clearly have you've got a game plan, and you play defense, right?
Yeah.
So like I'm sure. Well, so all right. So walk me through what it's like. Everybody's up to the line, and it's seconds before the ball is being snapped. Like, what kinds of things are you looking for? What trips you up? What are the aha moments? I'm curious about what goes through your mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're so locked in, um, so like the week before you start game planning, okay, like what are their tendencies? If they have trips, three wide receivers to the one side, this is what they're most likely to do. And so you watch film, you learn all the tendencies. So in the game, there is a lot of like, it's not just like see ball, get ball. When you're growing up, that's what it is. And
Yeah.
in some ways that's fun. You just read and react. But then when you get older, it's really about like analyzing like what's in front of you quickly and then making adjustments on the fly. So like as a middle linebacker, in the most simplest form, you're kind of reading the offensive guard, their first step, and then you go right to the backfield. But again, to your point, you're just reacting off of what you see in front of you, and goes back to the whole prepare properly, like know the tendencies, know what to look for, and then when you get in there, you're still reading and reacting, but you're doing a lot more reacting to what happens in front of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can, I want you to reflect on the times when you felt super confident inside of that game that you were playing, and compare and contrast that to the times when you weren't feeling so confident.
I think it just all comes down to preparation. Like the more, the more reps you get, and if you have great coaches that can help you see things that maybe you don't, watching film and going through practice and going through the reps and, going against scout team and just the more you can get into that flow state more quickly in the game because you're not doing a whole bunch of calculus. It's a lot more reactive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, what happens then when stuff starts going sideways? The game plan that you had in place, oh my God, it's not even close to working, and you're getting. Well, you guys didn't. I mean, certainly when you played at Ohio State, for example, you guys dominated. It was amazing, right? But like, what happens when stuff starts to go sideways? What was that? What's that like for you? What are those mental and emotional dynamics like for you?
Yeah, I think it helps to have a great team around you where if you can, you get a whole bunch of level-headed folks that have been through situations like that before, or you have a coach that can kind of like calm people down and get them to understand that it truly is just about the next play. And like that idea of just forgetting if there were a couple bad plays or if they had a good drive. Our coaches used to say like, hey, they're on scholarship too. They got good athletes. They're going to make plays. But it truly is about that next play. And so it's funny, a lot of the stuff that, I feel like we've learned over the past few years going on our hiking trips and all the breath work stuff, things like that would have been, I think, really helpful. Back when I was in college, didn't have it, but yeah, and then you just, if you have great teammates around you, you feed off of that energy, whether it's someone's freaking out or, someone's calm and focused.
It's interesting you say that because when I think of football, and even like two of our three boys experienced football at the high school level, man, there was a lot of intense, like crazy in your face kind of yelling and screaming on the part of the coaches. And I didn't see too many, hey, come on guys here, let's bring it down a notch. It was way the opposite. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk
Which is
about that.
unfortunate because, and I know we probably have buddies that could speak way better to like the neurology of it all. And, are you going to light up their amygdala and get them like, well, I can't, make a mistake. I like when you get, it's funny, you get to, like just seeing it at both levels. I was in here, I'm at T3 right now. I was in here last week and I heard, and it was a parent of just like a rec team that had come in to rent the place out to practice, and they were just yelling at this 8-year-old kid. And like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that is not a good recipe to keep that kid engaged in sport or in that practice. But it comes from the leadership, and I was so fortunate to have a guy like Tressel and then Fickle, who's now the head coach at Wisconsin. He was our D coordinator, linebacker coach. And they I think just intuitively and through experience just understood, like, look, if you're gonna like yell or get on a guy, figure that out in practice. But when it comes to the game, it's about positivity. It's about the next play. It's about keeping your guys leveled, and as much as possible, it's like you create that framework to keep them in that flow state.
Yeah, that's interesting. And now that you talk about it, I can remember watching, in the Jim Tressel years. He was not the guy running up and down the sidelines, throwing the playbooks, and right?
No, and he was the exact opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
But he definitely had a little piss and vinegar in him. Like he was a football guy. He had been a football guy his whole life, and he looked like a college professor, but he was a football coach through and through. And he got fired up, just like a lot of other coaches, do. But he just had a way about him. He was a true teacher in that sense. He had the teacher's mindset of like, hey, look, here's what went wrong on that play. We're going to correct it and move on to the next play.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I think that a lot of people, well, I would say that about Tressel, the intensity was there. And like one of my coaches that I worked a project with, he used to say, look, a great coach is somebody who can be there and say the right thing at the right time in the right way.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is sometimes you've got to get somebody's attention.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know when that time is. And
well,
sometimes
that goes back to the hard work that Tressel and his staff would do in getting to know every single one of their players. And I mean,
say more about that.
Well, I mean, so I remember the first year we went down there, and you're a dumb 18-year-old kid going in there. You just want to play football and lift weights and hit people and all that. And we're going in there.
They were feeding you well.
Yes, lots of good training table. They, I think like he'd have us read a book together, and then discuss different concepts. And he had his, certain kind of values, whether it was work or culture or character. And so like every day we'd talk about one of those, and we'd go deep. Like we'd talk about what it meant to us personally. As much as possible, he wanted everyone on the team to understand everyone's specific situation, where they came from, what high school they went to, maybe struggles they had faced, so I think it's a lot of work, especially for the coaching staff to truly know their players. But once they know them, then to your point, they know how to speak to them in moments of difficulty. How do we motivate this kid? And for the most part, it is like being calm, cool, and collective. But then every once in a while, there's a player or two where you got to maybe raise the tone a bit. And they knew how to do that so well.
That's, the executive coach inside, the leadership coach in me is like, oh my God, that is just awesome. It's one of the challenges I see definitely in organizational leadership. I know it's something that's been a part of team dynamics for a long, long, long time. This, right, the coach that's a maniac, and that he rules by fiat and he rules by fear.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in my experience, that happens a lot in organizations too.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because I think if I were to consider myself more of like a type A, focused on results, or back in the day it was how fast could I get, or how strong, or how many tackles. Now it's about different key metrics that drive the business, and it's so easy to get wrapped up in that, and it's so easy to look at some of the team members and wondering why they aren't hitting certain targets. But if you actually understand your people and where they came from, but also where they're at in that moment, maybe they're just having a tough time with kids at home, or they lost a couple clients and they're down. It's understanding just the broad picture that'll then allow you to have an honest conversation about how to get back on track with those key metrics.
For sure. I think that's
know thy team.
Know thy team.
Yeah.
So you had just this amazing modeling at Ohio State in Coach Tressel, in Coach Fickle. I'm imagining that also they built this culture such that all of the other coaches knew that was the right way to coach as well.
Yeah, it just trickled down. I don't think, first of all, they, I'm sure they had their rubric of how they hired coaches and what they, what kind of personality they wanted. So they did a great job with that. But then, it's pretty easy. You got a guy like Truss that, won national titles at Youngstown State, won his second year at Ohio State, or third year. I mean, it helps when you have that behind you, and then it's like, okay, I'm gonna be like that guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's something you remember about your time at Ohio State that represents like you at your best, performing at your best? It's like the absolute best moment. Maybe it was your best game. I want to go there and see if you can remember something for us. Yeah,
I think, I had a pretty kind of like choppy career there because of the injuries. But there were a couple games where, again, you just go, like, I can vividly remember like games in high school where you were in that flow state and it felt so good and everything's clicking. And, there were moments of that in games in college. One was against Iowa, where I just, the game felt easy. It felt slow, and you're able to make some good plays and help your teammates out. And same thing with track. So I did track my freshman year there and threw shot put indoors. And, I don't know. I think for me personally, I was just always really in tune with like my body and how I physically felt. And, it's the look good, feel good, play good type mantra. And, I always noticed I would have a good track meet or football game when I did everything right the week leading up to that.
Yeah, that's cool. That sounds really fun. Let me shift gears here, and I would say, like, what's the one do-over that you'd love to get from that time at Ohio State? If any.
Yeah, I would say. So my sophomore year, blew my shoulder out, had to get surgery. I think that was like 7th game of the year, and went through the rehab process and came back. And junior year, started off well. Started the first few games and then tore my ACL. That second injury, really did me in from a mental standpoint. Like I felt like I wasn't. It was because you had done all that hard work to come back from the first surgery. And so looking back, if I could do something different, if there was such a thing back then, I would have had like someone like you, helping on the mental side through that tough part. Because I think there's nothing tougher in collegiate sports than being on a team and going to everything, but knowing that you can't compete, the film, the practice, the games. And so that definitely, was a tough part, and few things along the way that I would have probably done differently.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's something about playing at the collegiate level that people don't really understand, especially in terms of if you think about like, all right, what does it take to compete at that level? Like, what do most people not really get or really understand?
I would say, people talk about the commitment from a time standpoint, so it's, I think when I was in college, it was like 20 hours a week. We couldn't do more per NCAA. We couldn't do more than 20 hours per week of film practice, training. But at that level, it is not just about those 20 hours that you're physically or mentally watching film, putting in work. It is from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. You're thinking about it. Everything. You're thinking about how do you optimize your sleep, your food, your hydration. Should you watch more film at night, and go to bed late? Like, it truly is 24/7 for people that are operating at that level. You could just ask my now beautiful wife. She had to deal with that a couple years in college, and yeah.
She was competing for time, and the competition was fierce, right?
Yeah.
Jim Tressel was her competition, right?
Yeah, but fortunately, he knew her well, and he would talk to her about that. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
see, I love that. Are you kidding me? That is the best.
I don't think, as well known as Tressel is, and as much as everyone, especially in the state of Ohio, love him, he is the most impressive, unique human being that I've come across. I've been done playing for what, 15, almost 20 years, and I would see him. If I saw him tomorrow, he'd say, "Hey, how's Auburn? How are your 3 kids? How are your parents?" And he could do that with everyone that he coached. He is a walking encyclopedia with his past players. I don't know how he does it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And again, the leadership coach inside of me, the performance coach inside of me. If you want to help people to be brilliant, to use a terminology that you and I have kicked around a little bit, that's the way to do that. It's to connect with them on a human level. And that is awesome.
It is, because then it goes back to Peter's whole thing about trust. And it's like, over time, all this stuff connects the more you talk to people and listen. But I've seen it with kids I've trained. When I spend the time to get to know an athlete that I've trained in the past, and maybe I go to their graduation or their game and sit and talk with their parents. The moment that trust is established, that athlete, or now in work, that employee, they open up, and then you truly see their strengths, their weaknesses, and you can put, the right people in the right seats as it relates to business.
Mm-hmm.
Because until that point, everyone's got their facade of, wanting to look and feel perfect. So their coach or boss doesn't see their weaknesses. But the second you get that trust established, I think that's when the magic happens.
That's the second job. That's the concept of the second job, right? So we've got our first job, which is whatever HR says is in the job description, right? That's your first job.
Yeah.
But most people have a second job, and that's the job of, not letting others see you at your worst, not letting others see you make mistakes, hiding your inadequacies. Like, we all have that. I had a conversation this morning with a young lady who's going to play Division I golf. And, she's a phenomenal athlete and a, terrific student, and she's a grinder, and she knows how to work hard. But she struggles when these fears come up around how people are going to judge her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a second job. So she's going into this program where there's like, look, it's like you described. It will be, workouts in the morning, practice in the afternoon, revisiting stuff at night. I mean, it's 24/7 for a Division I athlete, almost in any sport.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
feel like it's weird. It's like when I was growing up, everyone's like, I don't care what people think. And I think there are parts of that are really true, especially nowadays with social media, with young athletes. But at the same time, I think it's good to care what some people think. I think it's like it's kind of similar to how we talk about anxiety up here. With that becoming such a kind of a big thing over the past 5 to 7 years. I think there's a whole lot of anxiety that's good for people, and I think I don't know. I've just noticed like there's been like a general discussion around anxiety, and it being a negative thing, or caring too much what people think is a negative thing. I think there are aspects to both those that are really good and beneficial for athletes if they lean into it and have the right mind frame around it.
I think you make a good point. It's like, all right, where does focus come from? Sometimes we need something that's external that can focus us like a laser on the mission, right?
Mm.
I think sometimes caring how people are going to judge you can do just that. No question. I think where a lot of the conversations that I have with people in different performance spaces is, around this idea of caring or not caring about how people will judge you, is loosening our grip a little bit on our stories about what that would mean if someone judged you harshly. Right? Because we hold these ideas sometimes that, I couldn't possibly have that other person think ill of me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a broad statement. It fits in a lot of different performance scenarios. But I think that when we say, look, my focus is on doing my very best in this moment right now, and I will accept the outcomes and then go do the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different operating stance. And it doesn't mean I can't be intense about it. But I think your point is really well taken. It's like, yeah, sometimes I need something that will focus me like a laser, get me back in the play, get me back in the action and channeling that inner excellence that I know I would bring anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of like, for me, you do feel that anxiousness, whether it was, before a big game or, before a big meeting or whatever. And I remember for a while it was like, man, why do I feel this way, and and versus doing a total 180 on it and understanding that like, no, that's like an indicator that you're going to be locked in. Like it's a powerful tool if you think about it right and harness it.
I love that you said that too. It's like, how are you thinking about that? Well, I think about this anxiety that I'm feeling like it's the worst thing ever, and it means that I won't be able to perform. Okay, that's one way to think about it, for sure. Mm-hmm. Are there any other ways to think about it? Yeah. Another way to think about it is that anxiety and feelings of pressure come in and they go out. They don't stay forever.
Yep.
Do you?
I've just heard a lot of talk around, doing work to where you don't feel anxious or don't feel anxiety, and I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's how we're wired, and I think to your point, it is. It's how do you think about it? You could think about it as a bad thing, or you could think about it as a good thing.
Yeah, I don't. Our friend Jay Hennessy at the Cleveland Guardians, he hosts these speaker series. I don't know if you were on. Were you on the one a couple years ago where Kerry Evans was on? Kerry Evans was coached He was kind of a mental game coach for the New Zealand All Blacks at some point.
I may have been.
Yeah, and he wrote the book on, was Kerry Evans Blue Zones and Red Zones? I'm gonna completely mess this up, but on the call, I got to ask him questions. You know how I like to do that, Mike, is ask questions.
You're great at that.
Right.
That's why this is the perfect thing for you right here.
This is so good. There's a story there, folks. So I got to ask Kerry Evans about this very subject that we're talking about. It's like, hey, what's the deal? Like, when people are feeling not confident or they're feeling the pressure and anxiety of the moment, how do you coach through that? And he basically said that we teach our players that they don't need confidence. They don't need to be feeling at their best. And that even when stress and pressure and anxiety shows up, it doesn't mean that you can't perform at your best. You only think it does.
So that confidence thing there, I wish I would have had that when I was competing, because I did. It was like a mental thing, especially like with track. I talked earlier about like I go into a track meet just feeling physically great or off a little bit physically. Maybe I had a hard workout 3 days before, 2 days, and I didn't recover.
Yeah.
A little sore, and that would mess with my confidence. Just the understanding that, not everything needs to be tuned just right for you to still go out and compete well.
Yeah. It does with golfers. It's huge. Mm-hmm. Most golfers I talk to, especially when they have in their pre-warm or their pre-round warm-up, like they'll go to the range, they might hit 20 or 30 balls. They're going to putt for 15 minutes in an ideal scenario. They might get to the end of that and be like, oh my God, I could not hit. I hit everything super thin. I sprayed my drive left and right, and I didn't make a putt. So that's their pre-round.
Versus the mindset of thinking, oh, good, I got all the shit out of the way. Now I'm going to play good.
No, exactly. You're exactly right. Because they go to the first tee, they're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a horrible round. And we know, and there's actually some studies that like there's literally no link between what happens on the practice round in golf and the round you're going to play.
Really?
Yeah. So people think that the practice round in golf is supposed to give me confidence. No, that's not what it's about. It's about moving your body a little bit. It's about getting your hands on the club. It's about getting the club on the ball a little bit. That's it. What you do on the first tee over there is something completely different, because the objective is completely different too, by the way. So,
yeah.
Oh, this is so cool, Mike. Hey, I one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about, because this is, you're such an avid reader and such an avid self-development guy, and optimizing one's physical self is such a big part of what you and your staff do and how they help your clients. I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about some of the work that you guys are doing on the physical side, and especially in the nutrition and like optimizing our physical selves. And then ultimately, and this is like a classic question stack, sorry about this. Ultimately, like, how does that impact the mental game? So there we go. Just vomited a bunch of stuff on it.
No, the optimizing of like the nutrition piece specifically.
Yeah, like I'll often talk about the outside game versus the inside game as if they're siloed, but they're not really. They work like this.
Yeah,
they work. They're intertwined. They one is impacts the other for sure, right?
Yeah.
Why certainly the physical impacts the mental, right? But
the mind body thing.
Body thing. Yeah. What should we know about that?
A lot. I think it's all, it's like all one. I mean, it goes back to the idea that we just kind of poo-pooed about confidence, but I do think there's definitely something to it. Like just knowing that when you stand on that first tee box, I mean, you know how good of a golfer I am, and this is the
bomber. You're a bomber, Mike D'Andrea. It's a long way.
Far from it. But it's like, okay, I did everything I could possibly do leading up to this moment, from a nutrition, from a rest, from a hydration.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that a lot with our athletes up here. Like, look, you're going to go out and compete, and the only thing that you could really focus on that you can control is how you prepare for that leading up to it, that whole week. And what goes into that is, proper nutrition, proper rest, proper training, visualization, film study, whatever it might be, but having all of that kind of like in the bag, ready to go, good. That way you're not like, a couple hours before the game being like, oh shit, maybe I should watch that set again so I have it down, Yeah, so nutrition is definitely a big component. We talk about that with our kids all the time, and we have a couple nutritional therapists on staff that'll do like Zoom calls with parents and athletes, giving them as much advice as they can, kind of general, but a lot of stuff that you or I didn't have growing up, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I want to go there next. Like, what's something that you do today personally, and perhaps even coach your clients on that wasn't even an option or something you would remotely consider 20 years ago? Like, I almost want to say, did they allow smoking in the Ohio State locker room? I mean, right?
It's funny, a good thrower, a phenomenal thrower, he's an Olympic thrower, Brian Oldfield. He threw in like the 70s. I think he won a gold medal or two. But before his throws, he would literally smoke a cigarette, put it out on a toe board, and then go and throw.
Like, that is so freaking hilarious to me.
That was
and
great.
Bizarre. Yeah. Like,
But
you can get away with that in golf. Like, there's still even probably within the last 10 years. I don't know if there's anybody on the PGA today who smokes. Well, maybe so. John Daly plays in the senior circuit. I think he smokes on the course still, which is crazy. But yeah,
he's not worried about what other people think.
He is not worried about what people think. Yeah,
you should teach a class on that.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that we started this 15 years ago. Obviously, I've been passionate about this my whole life. I love the training and preparing side of things for athletes in sport. But I noticed from the kind of old school training that me and my buddies did in grade school and high school, it was truly like squat, bench, deadlift, do as much as you can. Form, it's a thing, but it's not critical. All of the
ancillary. I've heard of it.
Yeah, all the ancillary exercises around it. They're a nice to have, but you don't need them, which obviously when you get to college, and I had some great strength coaches in college, it's like, oh, there's a different way to do this, a better way. And so, we wanted to kind of bring that, and the whole world of performance training has really evolved over the past 15 to 20 years, much more scientific now. The worlds of like sports med and what we do on the performance training space has really merged. And there's a lot. It's funny. There's a lot of cool tech out there now to capture a bunch of data points on how to like refine, come up with the absolute best training program for an athlete. The key is like, how do you use that and integrate it to where you don't have a whole bunch of neurotic athletes running around, trying to track 20 different metrics, which I probably would have been one of those back in the day.
Sure.
Makes sense. So it's definitely an exciting time to be in this space with the way it's evolved over the past 15 to 20 years. And now it's like, hey, how do we just continue to bring what they're doing at the NFL, NBA, MLB level, down here for youth athletes?
What is something that you do today personally from a nutrition standpoint that like you weren't even thinking of 20 years ago or even 10 years ago?
I eat a lot less pasta now than I used to, you know.
Is that a carb thing?
It's a carb thing. It's an Italian thing, you know, growing up.
Well, that's why you ate it. But
It is,
you're
yeah.
not eating it because it's a carb thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I go back and forth. Like I think it was, Dr. Peter Attia.
Oh, yes.
You know, for a while, I feel like there was a big craze about intermittent fasting. And then there was, Peter Diamandis, I think, talks about how he was doing it and then he stopped it because he finally was able to look at all these biomarkers and was like, oh, maybe it's not the best thing. And so, I have things that I like today that will probably be outdated in a few years when more stuff comes out. But I did, the intermittent fasting for me was good. It really helped like level out my energy throughout the day, which is really all I care about now, managing my energy for work and for kids. I think I eat a much wider variety of food now than back in the day. I mean, it truly was like meat and potatoes and spaghetti and bread. Whatever I could do to put on weight and mass back in the day. Now it's
you walked around with like 50 more pounds on you than you have today, or something.
Going to school with 5 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Yeah. Well, you know how much I eat. I still have my moments, but
you still amaze you. You amaze all of us. It's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
a wider variety now. So
yeah. Well, and I know there's some things too. Like you and I have had the magnesium conversation. You've helped me to understand, where and when and how much, for me, and that's kind of cool. And just I think ways in which we can optimize our health so that we can stay active in the ways that we want to. Like even like in the golf space, there's a company, I'm going to get them wrong, I think it's called Sharp Focus, and they make these new little nutrition packs. And so you order a nutrition pack and it's for the next time you go out and play 18 holes. And there's like 6 little snacks. So you have the, and it's all portioned out and it's all timed and it's labeled. So like pre-round is some beef jerky. Hole number 2 is the trail mix. Hole number 6 is the almonds. You know what I mean? And then by the back 9, you're eating some, it's a little more carbs and dried fruit and stuff like that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I'm a huge fan because it has made the difference between me getting through a round without having to reach for a Snickers or a Gatorade, where it's completely spiking, my glucose and just completely kind of whacking me out. And, it keeps me very level and it keeps me able to focus in a really, really comfortable way. I'm amazed at what that little change has done for, when I play 18 holes.
See, I've always had that with golf. I just, the thing that levels me out is you get a good 4 or 6 beers in you, and then every couple of holes, you're good. My energy's good.
Yeah.
My focus is wane a little bit at the end, but
yeah. This moment brought to you by Michelob Ultra. Only 1 calorie. So, but yeah, lots of carbs and lots of alcohol. But yeah,
I'm excited for the day because that's so smart to like create that product based around like 18 holes golf.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the day when it becomes like hyper personalized based off your, genetic code and current physiological state. When you wake up and do a little finger prick or.
I know, like that's not very far away.
You need more vitamin C this morning. You're running low. That kind of thing. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Mike, we're coming up to our time here. One last question: what advice do you have for your younger self?
Be patient. I think I think when you're, especially like when you're young, and if you're going to play high level college sports or you're just starting your business career, I think patience is such an underrated thing because you want everything now. I came in freshman year to college wanting to start day one, everyone around me is like, you got to start, Dave. Like, and so the second that something goes off, or doesn't go the way you want it, it kind of rattles you in a just different way. You're like, so I think just playing the long game. There's a really good business guy in the fitness space, Alex Hormozy, and he's built up a couple of really successful companies, and he talks about the importance of playing the game long enough to get lucky. And so like in business for me now, I've been doing this 15 years, and those first 5 to 7 years are tough. I mean, you could focus on like one day at a time, and eventually a week and a month and a year. But I would say patience is number one. Number two would be focus, and honestly, focusing on what matters. And we have a quote in our trainer's office, and it's by Peter Drucker, and it's what is it? There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done. and
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it too, but I think figuring out the 2 or 3 things that really matter and going all in and focusing on that.
Yeah, is your ladder on the right wall?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Patience and focus. That's fantastic. Love that. Well, Mike, I really appreciate this time to do this. We'll have to do this again. There's so much more I want to ask you. And so let's plan to do this again. I did want to kind of throw this out here for those who are watching on the YouTubes. This is a picture of Mike. And Mike, you kind of look like a Navy SEAL, like in Afghanistan or something. Like that is quite the getup.
With a dangerous llama behind me.
With a dangerous pack animal ready to spit at somebody behind you. That's fantastic.
What a great trip.
That was a great trip. That was, I took that picture of Mike in the Wind River Mountains back in 2019, already 5 years ago almost. So
yeah, that's wild.
Great stuff. Well, Mike, again, thank you so much.
Shout out to Knowles. Shout
out to Knowles. Oh my goodness. Absolutely. We love Knowles. Great group of people and an amazing group of experiences. Mm-hmm. And we did the Dolomite trip, Mike and I, and a dozen others in September of last year, which was equally amazing. So a little different, a little more comfortable, I would say.
A little bit. The espresso and biscuits didn't hurt,
Yeah, exactly. The croissant at 11 o'clock every morning with your cappuccino
and
was a nice way to go.
The beds were nice too, compared to that.
Exactly. No sleeping on the rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Mike, hey, thank you again for doing this. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to catching up soon, and we'll do this again.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. This was great, and appreciate everything you do.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so that's a wrap on another episode of the Most Important Game podcast. Once again, I'm Paul Monahan, and my mission is to help you lead, play, and perform at your best. Man, that was a really great conversation with Mike D'Andrea. And his stories about his time at The Ohio State University in Columbus, such an amazing message about how to lead and how to coach. So for those who are coaches out there or those who are leaders, the Jim Tressel model that Mike talks about and how that's the way to reach people. I just really appreciated that. And it was really fun for Mike to share that. I think that as leaders, sometimes it feels like we have to be in others' faces to get their attention and to get to the mission and cross the finish line. But I think there's another way. And I think, man, you just heard how much Mike appreciates that. So appreciate that Mike was with us today. Again, lifelong learner, total growth mindset. You spend any time around this guy, Mike, and it's really, really inspirational. So super delighted that he was with us on the call today. So listen, if you'd like to learn more about the work that I do, you can visit my website. I'm at where am I? My website is paulmonahan.com. That's a tough one, Golly, I'm glad I have trouble remembering that. My book is there. You can go ahead and learn more about the book, The Most Important Game, and there's a link to go ahead and purchase that. It comes in all sorts of formats: paperback, hardcover, ebook, as well as audiobook as well. If you're watching on YouTube, definitely consider hitting the like button and subscribing. If you're listening to the podcast, please hit the follow button so that you don't miss an episode. We've got lots of episodes coming in the next few weeks. And if there's topics that you want to hear us tackle, to use a football analogy based on our time with Mike D'Andrea, then go ahead and let me know. I'm at paul@paulmonahan.com. Special shout out to our producer, Kevin Monahan. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for pulling all those levers behind the scene today. And as always, and until next time, remember, don't give up. Stay in the game. No matter the arena that you are performing in, it is possible for you to play better, struggle less, and enjoy more. See you next time.